Hey guys, Scott here, and to Versus, yes, I will be making a reading your DVD hot takes video. That is a good idea. So let's do that. This was a tweet that has been retweeted a bunch of times. What DVD opinion will get you like this? It's the standard, what's your hot take for the game? And I thought it'd be funny to read some of the most popular ones and talk about them. And yeah, we'll just go down the list in no real order or anything like that and just see what we get. This is sort of like the Reddit one I did, but I don't know. I find things like this really interesting and it's always good talking points. So let's start with this. Oh, Symptotic. I've gone against him before. Bloodlust is not needed. Hell, let's start with the original, the immediate point. Bloodlust is not needed. I think Bloodlust 2 and 3 are not needed. I think Bloodlust 1 is probably something they do need to keep in the game, just because sometimes, due to the RNG of maps, you need some safety net for some busted setup. It's usually on maps with a bunch of connected windows like Larry's. Pretty much the only time I ever get Bloodlust 1 or 2 is when I'm on like Larry's or any map that's got a bunch of connected windows, because sometimes there's physically nothing I can do. They just have a certain setup in a certain way and there's no correct way to run it. The map just happened to generate in a certain way in which some Bloodlust is needed. Now, I think 2 and 3 are kind of ridiculous, and they usually just simply reward people for playing badly at loops and stuff like that. But I think Bloodlust 1 should pretty much always stay in the game, even if they do end up fixing maps. Having that little bit of safety net is not super egregious where you suddenly just outplay everyone because you're moving 5% faster, but it also does help when you do get an insanely bad setup due to just truly bad luck. So other than that, I think Bloodlust is fine, but only in its first stage. Maps are not the biggest issue. Disagree. I definitely think maps are the biggest issue with that for sure. Killer Roll is the easiest it's been since DVD's release. It's hard to say if you mean overall or like on a per killer basis, because a lot of super broken individual builds have been nerfed. Actually, no, I will not say Killer is as easy as it's ever been. I think when we had Call O'Brien Eruption Overcharge meta, that was the easiest Killer's ever been. It was legitimately hard to lose with that combination to the point where it just got boring. So I think we just had the easiest it's ever been for Killer. It got a little bit harder again with the removal of the whole 3-genning thing. I'm glad they removed that because that shit was just awful for the game. But I do think that is when Killer was overall the easiest thing ever. Locker saves were fine. Ooh, that is a hot take. I do think I was personally okay with them because typically it just meant that people were just not doing gens and eventually they just run out of battery and that they're just not accomplishing anything other than dying repeatedly. So I never cared about it, but I do understand that it leads to mild stalemate situations that are just stupid for the game. So I do think it needed to go, but overall, yeah. Remove Bloodlust. I mean, yeah, that's basically the same thing here. I feel like it's going to be a common thing. Man, Bloodlust is a very common thing. Huntress and Trickster are the most boring killers in the game. Damn. I think Trickster is super boring, but at least Huntress, you can make conscious decisions to dodge a hatchet, and your decision matters there. With Trickster, you can't make 50 micro decisions a second of when he's going to pepper you with 50 knives. So all you do against Trickster is run forward and just hope that there's walls in the way. With Huntress, you can actually actively try to dodge a shot. With Trickster, you're just running away, and that's all you can do. So I definitely don't agree with that part. Doctor is one of the most enjoyable killers to loop in the game. That is a hot take. I think Doctor's boring as shit. Doctor guarantees a hit at essentially every single loop in the game. The only way he does not get a hit is if there's 2 connected loops. But if you're at a loop, Doctor will eventually hit you by shocking you, getting closer and closer, shocking you, getting closer. Doctor will always hit you at a loop. It's actually pretty not interesting going against Doctor. You just pre-drop and run around it for as long as possible if there's nothing connected. So I kind of disagree with that. I don't like him. Legion's fun to play against. They're easy to counter. Y'all are just bad. I agree with that completely. I love going against Legion. And the reason I do is because Legion has to actually play the game. You still can loop a Legion. You can use your skills as a survivor to matter against the Legion. Yeah, he's going to get that first hit on you for free, and that's absolutely true. But the worst thing you have to do there is mend for a few seconds. So it's not that big of a deal. And the main reason people have problems with Legion is because they're just terrible. It is legitimately a skill issue. The amount of times I see people grouping up against Legion, and the amount of times I see people healing against Legion, wasting so much time, and just as they finish the heal, they all get frenzied again. The amount of times I see people play so badly against Legion, the only reason Legion is even decent is because people are overall very bad. That's it. Legion is, in my opinion, very fun to go against because I don't care about being injured. And at that point, there's not much he can really do to me. I can pretty much do whatever I want, and it feels great. Unless he's got, like, Eerie Button or something like that. Then it gets a bit more complicated because he can sort of insta-break the pallets. But for the most part, I like going against Legion, so I completely agree with this. That's me. I'm going to double down on it. Hyperfocus is the best gen perk in the game. It just is, mathematically, no matter what it is. Combo that with Stakeout, you do gens in 40 seconds. That's all you need. Lucky Break's one of the best perks in the game. I know these are all my own opinions, but it is. I don't care what you tell me. I've made videos about this. You know what? I'm going to go over mine. Everything that I've said in this tweet, I've already made separate videos about. There's no point. DCing is not nearly as serious as people make it out to be. Like, I'm not having fun in a video game, then yeah, I'm going to leave. I have always agreed with that overall mindset. I have always thought disconnects are not as big of a deal as people claim it to be. Now, trust me, it's very annoying when you're in a position to win a match as Survivor and your teammate just DCs because they went down one time. I don't care about people DCing because, like, you know, they're getting face camped or whatever, which, by the way, you shouldn't DC if you're getting face camped. If you're getting face camped, you should sit on the hook, take your 2 minutes of boredom. I know it sucks, but in doing that, you'll ensure basically everyone else gets to escape, and so the killer feels bad about it. And if the killer gets negative reinforcement from it, he's less likely to camp in the future because it's not working anymore. Unfortunately, people are selfish and don't want to wait the 2 minutes. I get it too. That's completely fair. And so they kill themselves immediately. And at that point, well, now it's a 3v1 with 4 gens up, and now they can win from face camping. So that is a huge issue. But yeah, I've always been of the whole mindset there shouldn't be DC penalties, because if somebody does not want to play a game, they're not going to play the game. Whether they AFK or they just kill themselves on hook or they suicide, like, whatever. If someone does not want to play a game, they're not going to play a game. It's dumb a lot of the time. A lot of the time, there's not a good reason for it. Someone just gets hit by a Wraith and they just DC at the start of the match. Yeah, that shit's stupid. And sometimes there's a lot of really good reason for it. Someone's slugging you out for 3 minutes and this is stupid. I'm just going to leave. So there are definitely times that are justified to disconnect, and then there are times that are not justified to disconnect. The problem is there's no consensus on what those are. People just take the extremes. They think if you DC once, you're basically Hitler. And, you know, if you never DC, you're just taking the game too seriously and things like that. So there are definite extremes of both sides that make disconnecting seem more obnoxious than it actually is. But I like I said, I don't care. I can tell when people are not having fun. Sometimes when someone pays me to do like a really obnoxious build, like Mother-Daughter Ring on Spirit or something, and people go down and they DC, I don't go, oh, these fucking guys ruining my game. I just go, yeah, no, that's fair. I get it. A lot of times killers play in certain ways that are very, very conducive to people disconnecting. Like if you do Condemned Sadako, you should expect the entire team to DC. If you play Skull Merchant in general, you should expect the entire team to DC. You're just pretty much going to be playing the solo PvE mode once these bots come in, because no one is going to want to play against that. And that's not really your fault as a player of those roles. It's the devs' fault for allowing something so absurdly boring to even exist to begin with. So it's definitely on the devs for that. But I don't think players should be punished for having to go against that. Again, there are people that DC for stupid reasons, and we can make fun of them, but there are also legitimate reasons too. So, hate when someone is complaining about something and people disagree, just apply with humane survivor and humane killer. Yeah, I agree with that too. Probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people make about this game is they just assume people only play one role. They say, like, you know, there's 4 times as many survivor players as there are killer players. No, there's not. People play both roles. Now, they probably don't play them equally. They'll lean towards one side or the other, but it's not like there's 100,000 survivor players and 25,000 killer players. That's not how it works. It's probably closer to 50,000 each, and they just change which roles that they're actually playing. So saying you main X or you main Y based on whatever someone's saying is stupid, because in all likelihood, most people have tried out both roles of the game and they just prefer one. So it doesn't mean they haven't experienced the other side. It just means that they don't regularly play that as much as whatever they're currently playing, and that's it. So I've always thought invalidating others' opinions based on you main X is just, that's the sign of someone that doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about most of the time. And it's usually they're just on a shit ton of copium. Old RPD was fine and they ruined it with this rework. Oh, fuck off, RBD Queen. Get the fuck out of here. That shit was awful. This take is bad. Tofu. 3-gen strats are actually a good thing. Well, this better have a good follow-up when balanced correctly. Ever since Call of Brian's nerf, they aren't that strong. That's true. Ever since Call of Brian, Eruption, and Overcharge have been basically murdered. 3-gens are not nearly as strong. Very few killers are very good at holding that now, which is excellent for the game. Having gen macro strategy in the game is a good thing. I agree with that completely. The gen and macro strategy is one of the most, if not the most important aspect of killer. It's the hardest thing to teach in the game for killer. And that's probably why a lot of killers think they're really good at the game, but they're actually not, because they haven't mastered the macro skill of the game. They'll say, I'm really good at chasing. I've got my moonwalks down. I can down people in 30 seconds in a chase and I'm still losing. It's because they have no macro game. They don't know that the chase they're taking is not the correct chase. Even if they can end that chase in 30 seconds, they're interrupting one guy, even though you should have known that there were 3 people on this gen here, and that would result in far more game delay if you split off. So that kind of stuff is extremely hard to teach, because it's just sort of a general feel that changes every game. There's no guide you can do for that. So macro killer skill is by far the hardest thing in the entire game to learn, much harder than any individual killer skill like hitting hillbilly chainsaws or learning how Nurse Blink works. The macro gameplay is very, very difficult to learn. And that's something you only get from hundreds or thousands of hours of playing the game. There's just no shortcutting that, unfortunately. So I do very much agree that gen macro strategy in the game is a good thing. The main issue is killer designs that excel at 3-genning while being bad elsewhere. That's also another really good point, because the reason Skull Merchant does 3-gens is because that's all she's good for. 3-genning is a default strat basically every killer in the game can do if they have nothing else to do, and Skull Merchant basically has nothing to do. She's so stupidly designed that 3-gens are the only thing to fall back on. Now, I don't agree that the 3-gen strategy, even while it's nerfed, is still good, because all it aims to do is delay things as much as possible, not end the game in any fashion. 3-gens are hated because of the stalemate nature of what a 3-gen is, not because they just slow the game down. Because it gets to the point where a killer kicks a gen, hits a survivor off the gen, survivor runs to the other side of the map where there's no gen, so the killer won't chase them. They heal up, they come back, gen regressed a bit, hit him, send him back, heal up. It's just, you're just not accomplishing anything until eventually one side after 40 minutes bleeds out enough times or just enough gen progress is done. So, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's, if you don't have a one-shot, it just becomes this incredibly boring stalemate. So I hate the whole concept of 3-gens. I wish they didn't exist entirely. But I do very much agree that macro gameplay is something that is very, very important. Okay, Lily, that's cheap. I can't talk about everything. Save the Best for Last is only worth running on 3 killers, and none of them are the ones you guys are complaining about. That is a based opinion. I think Save the Best for Last is not overrated. Play with your food is overrated as shit. Save the Best for Last is pretty damn good. It's a very strong perk. But I would say it is only worth it on a couple of killers, like, Demogorgon. Any killers that can mitigate stack loss. It's very important. Hell, even Deathslinger can mitigate one of the stack loss. So even if you have a killer that can mitigate one of them, it's still good. But having to lose 4 stacks every time an Obsession decides the body block makes the perk not worth running on a lot of killers. But yeah, those killers that have very easy to hit powers that are not basic attacks, yeah, it's very, very good on them, and it's why it's such a staple on killers like Demogorgon. Killers get their way by judging how... What the fuck is this picture? Judging how fast they nerf survivor perks even before it fully gets released. That's dumb. Big dumb. Blight's very fun to face when he doesn't have top-tier add-ons. Completely agree. I think Blight is one of the most fun killers in the entire game to go against when he's not running Crow, Eerie Tag, Alk Vial, Compound 33, or Alk Ring. Or Adrenaline Vial, not Alk Vial, sorry. Yeah, when he's not running any of those add-ons, Blight, in my opinion, is super fun to go against. It's just when he puts on his add-ons that keep Neo dodging nerfs somehow that he starts becoming really, really unfun to go against. Pinhead's fun to face when he doesn't have Franklins and your teammates are not brain dead. In other words, Pinhead is not fun to go against, unfortunately. Nurse is easy and requires very little skill. That's kind of a... I like these. These are hot takes. Nurse is easier than people think she is. She genuinely is. I can play Nurse for... I've probably played 30 Nurse games in my entire life. I can play Nurse and warm up for 20 minutes and 4K every single game for the rest of the day, and I'm horrible at Nurse. Because all it is muscle memory of blink distance. That's the only skill you have to learn with Nurse. You don't have to learn any other aspect of Dead by Daylight, which is why I always make a joke. If you played Nurse, you might as well have a separate launcher for the game, because you're not playing DBD, you're playing Nurse, which is, it's just a totally separate thing. So the only thing you have to learn is the distance of your blinks, which, it does take a little while. That's not the easiest thing on the planet to learn. So she has a skill floor that's above the other killers because it's not basic killer skill sets. It's learning this specific power interaction. But once you learn that, you blink as soon as someone gets out of line of sight. You blink at the last place you saw them. And when you make that blink, if they double back, well, then you just hit them. If they didn't double back, you use the second blink to correct. That's Nurse. That's the entirety of Nurse gameplay. Once you master her, there's basically nothing survivors can do. So I do think she's easy. I wouldn't say she's easy. I would say she's much easier than people give her credit for. They think it's okay that Nurse can 4K every game because it takes so much to master her. It doesn't take very much to master her. She's not super hard to play. You didn't even... What? You didn't even qualify. Okay. I kind of want to read the ones that have more comments on them, because that means they're hotter takes usually. Survivor mains like to rage quit too much the second something doesn't go your way. You could just not play this game. That seems like a bit of a killerism, but I will say that people on Survivor side do bitch more than... I mean, people on both sides bitch way more than they should, in my opinion. And I think he's really talking about the people that go down. For example, I've had people like I have Spirit Fury charge or someone breaks Haunted Grounds early. Basically, something happens where a survivor feels like they got robbed because something happened out of their control and then they go down, then they DC immediately. That I think that's stupid. I think DCing if you're playing against a condemned Sadako or a 40-minute Skull Merchant game or a killer who's purposely bleeding you out or face camping you, I understand DCing from those games. But just because something doesn't go your way in an individual chase or something like that, and you get hit and you get hit and you DC because of that, that I think is really stupid. That should not happen. You got to accept that RNG and dumb shit like that. It's just part of the game. If you don't like that, why the fuck are you playing Dead by Daylight? Some things or just ridiculous random shit happens every game out of your control. I would say a good 25% of every match you have zero control over. As killer, the map generation you just have no control over. As survivor, your teammates might put you in a scenario you have no control over. Sometimes there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop something bullshit from happening, but that's just part of the game. If you don't accept that, you shouldn't play the game. It is as simple as that. Oh my god, stop with this shit. Pain Resonance is the healthiest perk in the game. Pain Resonance is great. I love Pain Res. It incentivizes hooking everyone individually. It's got a ton of regression. It basically adds an entire 6 generator that they have to do. Rancid Avatar is a shit map, and some of the worst RNG in the game needed to be changed. Well, it's getting changed. I don't know if I agree. I've always liked Avatar. I've always thought it was fine. Knight's not as bad as everyone else makes him be. He is. Opinion invalid. All right. I wish there was a way to like sort by like the biggest ones, because a lot of these are just dumb. Gen rushing doesn't exist. It's quite literally the only objective survivors had. Leave chases you aren't winning, run gen perks, and apply actual pressure, and they wouldn't pop left and right every 3 seconds. You being better, your objective doesn't make gen rushing real. Based and true. Gen rushing does not exist. Well, let me clarify. Gen rushing does exist. It's just almost always a detriment. Like actual gen rushing is letting your teammates die on the hook because you just have no intention of doing anything. That is when, stupid killers say you're tunneling gens. That's actually tunneling gens. But when that happens, it's good for you as killer because it means they're just letting teammates die on hook. They're ignoring everything else in the game other than the gen they're on. That's a good thing for a killer. True gen rushing is a good thing for a killer because it means they're just ignoring everything else in the game and their teammates are just going to die. So that's a good thing. A lot of the time, though, it's the start of the match. You might get 1 chase and 2 gens pop. That's normal. That's how the game is supposed to work. You shouldn't be freaking out if you've only gotten 1 hook at, 3 gens left. That's completely normal. The bell curve of a match of a killer's pressure, it's barely anything at the start of the match. And as it gets closer to the end, they get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger until the end game, they're at the absolute strongest. So that's just how the bell curve of the killer's pressure goes. And killers always have the least pressure at the start. So if a couple of gens pop before you're first down, that's okay. That's supposed to happen. Because now that guy's on the hook, you initiate a chase on another guy that's 2 people occupied. And the third guy has to come save the guy who's dying on the hook. So that's 3 people occupied. So with 1 down, now there's only 1 guy left on generators as opposed to your first chase where there's 3 people on gen. So that's just how the game works. That's okay. That's normal. Don't feel pressure. Don't feel like you're losing it or anything like that. That's just how the game works. It's fine. A lot of killers don't realize that and they freak out because they feel like they're not doing enough. I will say, though, something that people should probably learn to get better is at the start of the match, identifying which chase is the best chase is really important. For example, this is like a very unknown tip. If you spawn at the start of the match and you see 1 survivor relatively close to you, you probably should not chase that survivor. Because a lot of times what the generation will do, it'll spawn 3 people together and 1 guy kind of farther away from the group but closer to the killer. You'll notice this a lot on maps like Azerov's Resting Place and things like that. If you have a guy spawn on the same side of the map as you, it's extremely likely the other 3 spawn clustered on the other side. So a lot of the time, unless you can get it down on that first guy really, really fast, it's actually better to just ignore it and go to the other side and look for the 3, because interrupting the 3 is always better than downing the 1. So that's a little like random tape. It's not on every map, but that is something. Just little things like that most killers don't really pick up on. They just see the first guy and they commit too hard to the first chase. They lose 2 gens and they're like, oh, I feel like I'm losing. Sometimes it's more important choosing your chases, even if it takes you 10, 15 seconds longer to get into that chase. So like I said, that shit's very hard to teach. I have no idea how to teach that. It's just something that you just learn over time from the game. Yeah. Nurse is a fun killer. Oh, God. What else we got? I'm looking for just ones. DCing should count as a kill. Yep, completely agree. I don't know why disconnecting doesn't count it as a kill. I think for purposes of getting Merciless Killer, it does. I'm not 100% sure on that. If it doesn't, it absolutely should. TC penalties should be longer. I think for repeat offenders, it can be longer. I think the first one being 1 minute is fine. The next one being 5 minutes is fine. After that, if you're disconnecting 3 times a day, then yeah, you're problematic and I wouldn't be upset if it was like an hour after that instead of 15 minutes. So I don't mind disconnecting, but I wouldn't be opposed to that in that particular scenario. Most of the time when survivors complain about being tunneled, they're not actually getting tunneled. It's usually they chose to play carelessly and get frustrated when the killer punishes them for playing poorly, blaming the killer for unfair rather than them playing bad. I think there's some truth and some also not truth to that. So a lot of the time, how many times have you, as killer, you see someone get unhooked and the unhooked guy sprints into you and they body block you from hitting the other guy? And then you obviously hit them and try to kill them, and then they complain about tunneling. That's an example of a survivor-induced tunneling. You did that yourself. I'm not trying to tunnel you. You just literally blocked my path. I have nothing else to do. I'm going to tunnel you now because you deserve it. But no, there definitely are killers that will absolutely tunnel you. And just because the person that is getting tunneled is perhaps not as strong of a player and they're, playing poorly, for example, it doesn't mean that they're suddenly not getting tunneled. They are getting tunneled. They're getting tunneled because they're bad. And the killer has decided that that's going to be an easy way to get someone out of the match early, which makes it a lot easier for them. So I don't agree with the way this is worded. They are getting tunneled. Just because they're bad doesn't mean they're not getting tunneled. So don't completely agree with that. Solo Survivor sucks more than killer play. No question. Solo Survivor is still the weakest role in the game, hands down. Immediately DCing against the killer you don't like is cringe, and you're cringe if you do it. Boo-hoo, if you got a Skull Merchant, at least try and entertain the match because baby quitting immediately just fucks over your team. I agree for everybody but Skull Merchant. Because if you disconnect, it doesn't matter. No one wants to play the Skull Merchant game. If you disconnect, you're doing a team a favor because now they can just give up. That you shouldn't. Skull Merchant is such bad design. The only way we fix her is by never letting Skull Merchants play against players ever again. And again, it's not the people that like Skull Merchant's fault. It's the devs' fault for making that killer a thing. But their design is so bad and so unhealthy for the game that anyone playing it is making the game worse. I genuinely feel that strongly about how badly Skull Merchant is designed. So I would say that's true against everybody but Skull Merchant. Every killer except a small handful, Blight, Spirit, Nurse, Wesker, need buffs. All killers have a relatively similar pick rate. Don't nerf the strong, buff the weak. I mostly agree with that. I think you need to include a few more killers in here. There are some other killers that are not needing of buffs, like Artist, for example, is extremely good. And you should curate the list, but I do think the bottom half, your Pig, Myers, Trapper, like all those killers, those need significant buffs. Yeah, I do agree that we're like here right now. It needs to be more like this. It's okay that some are better than others, but the disparity between Trapper and Nurse is like, it's a different video game at that point. So yeah, I do agree mostly with that. DBD is fun if you don't sweat about it, like your wife will leave you if you don't escape her at the 4K. Not every toxic-looking action is actually toxic. The game's hella bugged and sometimes the teabags are just malfunctions. Okay, I don't know about that. I've never seen someone teabag because they're malfunctioning. But I don't think teabagging is toxic. I think it's just, it's competitive shit-talking in animation form, but it's not toxic. I think people use the word toxic way too loosely and liberally nowadays. Toxic is like, hey, go kill yourself, at the end of the match. Genuine, like, personal attacks and insults and, making it about the person instead of like, haha, you tunneled me, but I escaped to get teabagged. Like, that's just friendly shit talking, man. If you think that's toxic, I think you need to go outside or something. That's just really not that bad. You can have toxicity in this game, especially with post-game chat. Absolutely. But just stuff like teabagging, if you think that's toxic, I mean, you need to touch grass. It's really just the most basic shit ever, man. As long as survivors bring flashlights, dead hard, and meta perks, I'll bring the grossest humanly possible. Okay, that's a skill issue. You need to get good. Game's at a good point right now. The anniversary, whoever. Who the fuck decided to make a power to insta-down survivors in the event? Okay. I will admit the exposed insta-down on Bloodlust is one of the dumbest things I've ever done. It's tied to a limited time event, so whatever. Who cares? But I wouldn't be opposed to seeing anniversary events like that having effects like that in the base game, but they would need to be toned way the fuck down. Because, yeah, that exposed one is really stupid. Yeah, I think we'll call it here. I mean, there's literally 1,800 of these. It'll take me 6 hours to read all these, so I might just continue more of these on stream today because it's actually just fun to read. Midwich is the best map in the... What the fuck is wrong with you? Absolutely blot. No. that's going to be it for at least this video. Yeah, I think I might do more of this on stream, but that was fun. Thanks for hanging out. This was a fun time, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.